Often people think that they're struggling with an emotion of loneliness, but what they're really missing is that the body is giving them signals for an unmet need. In this video, we're going to continue the conversation around human relationships and the experience of loneliness that so many people feel. And the reason this is so important is because it dramatically affects people's ability to thrive in their life. They don't get to build the life they want because they're consumed by this state of emotion of loneliness. Loneliness messes with our head. It tells us stories about ourselves that aren't true and that most certainly get in the way of you having positive impact, but also just having a positive lived experience. Now, I hate doing this part, but if I don't, you've got no reason to trust anything I'm about to say. I'm Steph Saffer. I'm a certified executive coach. I've spent years working one-on-one with clients on exactly these types of issues and questions. And before that, I spent 16 years in clinical practice as an acupuncturist, listening to people's real lives up close. There's so much information out there about loneliness, but it doesn't really address the question of, how do I know if I'm lonely? How do I know if my friends are lonely? The first distinction that I want to make before we get too far into this is what we just talked about. Loneliness is not just an emotion. It is an unmet need. You've heard me say this probably 100 times, but humans are wired for social connection. And some of our most basic needs as humans are the need for belonging, the need for safety and security, and the need to feel loved and worthy. So when we're feeling lonely, it's not just the emotion of feeling alone. It's our nervous system telling us that our need for meaningful connection is not being met. It's sort of like how hunger tells you when you need to eat. Loneliness tells you when you need to connect. The problem is that a lot of people are really out of touch with their body's signals, and there are a lot of reasons for that, many of which I talk about on the podcast, on YouTube. Constant dopamine hits from social media, short form videos, digital connection, easy access to everything, just to name a few. But because we are out of touch with our emotional signals, we misread them. So oftentimes what happens is, instead of recognizing, hey, I think I'm lonely, people will say things like, oh, I'm just really exhausted. People are so annoying. I don't feel like talking. I just need to get through this week. And then, of course, the infamous phrase, I'm fine. Sometimes these things might be true, but many times they are disguising a basic need for connection. And I think this is where it can get kind of interesting. I want to talk about some of the disguises that loneliness can wear. And I've seen these disguises show up in multiple forms throughout the years that I worked with patients, and even now, working with coaching clients. The first disguise that I see is irritability. Many times when people are lonely, their tolerance can drop. So small inconveniences will suddenly feel huge. Maybe somebody's chewing too loudly, or the traffic feels unbearable, or you get offended by your coworker's email. And the reason this happens is because connection can often act as a buffer against stress. Connection actually makes us healthier and more resilient. So without it, things feel harder, heavier, and that leads to an increased sense of irritability. Another disguise for loneliness is anger. I've talked about my Grammy before on social media, on my podcast. She was about almost 96 before she died, and she was such a social creature. She was always talking to people in the grocery store, in the coffee shops. She was almost magnetic. I would watch her when I was a little kid talking to people because it was so cool to see how drawn people were to her. But as she got older, she got a little more isolated and she got lonely. And with that loneliness came anger. Now, we knew that she wanted to be in connection with us. We knew what her anger was about. She wanted to connect with her family and her friends, but it was difficult for her. She didn't want to move closer to us. She liked living in her home independently. She also was outliving all of her friends. And so she didn't have the same types of opportunities to connect with them because her friends were passing away. When people disguise loneliness through anger, sometimes that anger is directed outward and sometimes it's directed inward. That outward anger can sound like nobody cares about me, or you never show up for me, or nobody ever wants to call me. People are selfish. This was often my Grammy. She was outwardly angry at the world. When that anger is turned inward, it can sound like, what's wrong with me? Nobody likes me. Nobody wants to be around me. And the funny thing about anger is that sometimes it feels easier to be angry than it does to feel sad, because anger feels more powerful. It feels more protective of yourself. You're in a defensive position, and so you feel less vulnerable. So sometimes that anger is disguising sadness, which is then disguising loneliness. This takes us to our next disguise, which is numbness. Some people don't feel sadness. They feel nothing. We call that apathy. When people are apathetic, they just don't feel a lot of those emotions. And what that looks like in real life is that they stop getting excited. They stop laughing with their friends. They stop calling people back. They turn down the invitations to hang out. It's like they're experiencing an absence of joy. And that numbness disguises what's really underneath, which is the need for social connection. Another way loneliness is disguised is through overworking. And this is such a huge one for high achievers. Oftentimes, when people are really driven and motivated, they don't really notice loneliness right away because they're so busy. And instead of tuning into that feeling, their body's signals, they just work longer, they schedule more meetings, they fill up their empty spaces in their calendar, and they put primary focus on achievement. And this becomes a substitute for belonging, this direct energy toward achievement. And this is all great until the calendar clears or until they realize how isolated they've truly become. And I see this with my high performers often. The last one I want to highlight is constant distraction. Many times when people are feeling lonely, they will distract themselves from that feeling by scrolling, watching Netflix, listening to podcasts, constantly working more, doing more errands or busy work. There's no end to the ways that we can distract ourselves, and none of those things are bad. But underneath all of that activity is that need that is not being met. So we can see that there's a lot of different ways that loneliness can show up. You might recognize some of these in yourself or in some of your friends or your family, the people around you. I know that I have used some of these disguises for loneliness in my life. There was a time in my late 20s, it was probably a year or two, and I was just very lonely. I had recently graduated from my master's program, and I was kind of out on my own for the first time in a long time, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was struggling financially and trying to start a business. I didn't have my community of colleagues around me in the way that I had in the previous 3 years before. And my answer to loneliness was to stay super busy. I threw myself into work and overachieving, and I filled my calendar. But for me, it was very clear that what I really wanted was true community and quality connection. And for those 2 years, I was not happy. I was not truly happy. It wasn't until I forged new relationships and found new community that I started to find joy in my life. And the research tells us what loneliness does to us. There's a lot of studies about this, and it all confirms that it affects not only our mental health, but also our physical health. It causes higher stress hormones, increased inflammation, poor sleep, greater risk of anxiety and depression, higher blood pressure, worse immune function. I saw that a lot in the clinic when I was in clinical practice, and earlier cognitive decline. If we think about what the Harvard study of adult development tells us, it showed that the quality of your relationships at age 50 would dictate your health at age 80. It talked about how protective true quality connection with people was for your brain. And I think about this a lot because I've had many experiences that have allowed me to dig deeper in a conversation with somebody and understand what was underneath their initial disguise, beyond the irritability, the anger, the distraction, the numbness. And I think it's important to understand what this could look like. So I want to give you a few examples of what I've noticed in the world. Sometimes loneliness looks like the friend who says that they're always too busy. It looks like the coworker who has become overly cynical over the years. It's the parent who's overwhelmed and they've stopped doing the hobbies that they love. It's the leader who seems overly impatient with their team. It's the neighbor who doesn't ever want to leave their house, or the friend who dominates every conversation, or the friend who never says anything. It could be someone making jokes about having no life. Loneliness has a lot of different faces and disguises, and I think it's helpful to be able to understand what they might look like. The crazy thing about this whole situation, and I think it's one of the cruelest parts about loneliness, is that oftentimes loneliness can create behaviors that create more loneliness. It's like when people say they don't have enough energy to work out, to move their bodies, but that lack of movement then creates more low energy. So it becomes this vicious cycle. The same is true of loneliness. The anger or the irritability or the distraction or the numbness, those types of behaviors push other people away. And in the person who's feeling the loneliness, it drives behaviors that promote more loneliness. For example, say you cancel plans because you don't feel like going, and then people stop inviting you. And then you start assuming that they don't care about you. So you withdraw even more. The very thing that you need becomes the thing that you avoid. That's the vicious cycle. Now, if you're like me and you hear all of this, your brain probably goes to the question, well, what actually helps? What helps people get out of loneliness? And what helps me get out of loneliness if I'm experiencing it? There's 3 things I want to think about. The first thing is to stop ignoring the emotional signals in your body. Ask yourself the question, what lies beneath these other emotions that I'm feeling? If I'm feeling anger, what lies beneath that? What's the true desire? If I'm irritable, what's the driving factor behind that? What is the feeling that I'm having? Just asking yourself those simple questions can help you start to tune into your own signals again and recognize loneliness for what it really is. The second thing to do is to increase your surface area for connection. And what I mean by that is put yourself in situations where you will have the chance to connect with other people. Leave your house. Go to a coffee shop and work. If you're ordering food, don't get it delivered. Go pick it up at the restaurant. Crazy, I know. Go to the parties. Go to the social events you're invited to. Show up to the meetings or the networking events. We as humans can get a little complacent and feel like the victim in our life when we're feeling these low frequency emotions, and it makes us isolate even more. So increase your surface area for connection by putting yourself in the path of connection more often. And then finally, the last thing to think about in getting out of loneliness is to simply connect in person more. I know that I harp on digital connection all the time. I don't think it's a bad thing. I use it every day, but there's no substitute for human interaction. We do better. We feel better. We are better together. Our biology responds more profoundly when we are looking somebody in the eye in real life, when we hear the tone of their voice, when we can see their facial expressions and their body language. There's an energy exchange when we are in connection with somebody in person. I really believe that's being lost for so many people in the world today because of all of our technological advances and our human tendency for complacency. Another thing that people don't think about very often is staying connected to nature. Don't cut yourself off from the energetic flow of the earth. I don't care if that sounds woo-woo. We are of the earth. We are connected to everything that is alive, and staying in your sterile, temperature-controlled home can sever that connection if you're not careful. Go outside, get barefoot, walk through the woods or on the grass, go to the beach, walk in the sand, look at the ocean, look at the sunset. These are things that can also create a sense of connection within us, even if there isn't somebody around. So here comes the challenge part. And you know I love giving you a challenge at the end of every video. Ask yourself, who have you been meaning to reach out to or connect with in your life? Just because you want to, not because you feel like you need to or you need something from them, but because your life is better with this person in it. And then give yourself an action to take today to be able to connect with that person. We don't have to make grand gestures to stave off our feelings of loneliness. Many times it's just a little thing that can create quality connection between people. I think at the end of the day, what we can all recognize and what you probably already intuitively feel is that sometimes loneliness isn't simply the absence of people. You might be surrounded by people And so it's not always about that. It's the absence of feeling known by people. That's why you can be in a marriage and feel totally alone, or be a public speaker or a group fitness instructor, or be surrounded by your colleagues every single day of the work week and not feel known. It's also why one single honest conversation with someone who truly sees you can change the trajectory of your entire week. As the Harvard study so beautifully told us, it's not always about collecting more relationships. It's about deepening the ones that we already have. Now, if you're looking for more connection, if you want to take this idea further beyond just a YouTube video and you want to work with somebody, this is the type of work that I do as a coach. All you have to do is send me an email with the word YouTube in it. Send it to steph@stephsaffer.com. Just write the word YouTube, and we'll set up a time to connect and see if coaching might be a good fit, or at the very least, you're a part of our Impact Ready community. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for watching. And as always, my friend, thank you for being ready to impact.